The airport was buzzing with excitement, couples rushing past, suitcases rolling on the shiny floor, and the aroma of fresh coffee from nearby cafes. I could feel the excitement pulsing in the air, mixed with my own nervous energy. My husband, James, held my hand tightly as we navigated the crowded terminal. His smile was wide, almost blinding in its sincerity. "This is it, Emily. Our first adventure as a married couple," he said, his eyes sparkling. I smiled back, though a part of me felt a strange knot of anxiety in my stomach. I had dreamed of this honeymoon for years, imagining the romance, the intimate moments, the laughter. But standing here, I realized I was nervous in a way I hadn't expected. Boarding the plane was chaotic. Flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisles, directing passengers to their seats. I remember noticing one in particular, a woman with striking features, a polished uniform, and a confidence that seemed almost magnetic. She smiled at passengers with an ease that made her glow in the fluorescent cabin lights. James was busy placing our carry-ons in the overhead compartment, oblivious to my wandering gaze. I sat down, feeling the seat beneath me, adjusting to the cramped space. I tried to focus on him, on us, but my mind kept drifting to the flight attendant. There was something about her presence that made the air feel electric. As the plane taxied down the runway, the engines roaring, my heart raced for reasons I couldn't entirely explain. James reached over and held my hand. "You okay, Em?" he asked. His voice was soft, filled with concern. I nodded, forcing a smile, though my thoughts were scattered. The takeoff was smooth, and soon we were soaring above the clouds. The flight attendants began their routine, demonstrating seatbelt instructions and safety procedures. And then she walked past me again, glancing my way. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt an unfamiliar heat rise in my chest. Over the next few hours, the honeymoon cabin settled into a rhythm. James dozed off, exhausted from wedding preparations, while I sat by the window, gazing at the clouds below. The flight attendant returned, offering drinks and snacks. I asked for a glass of wine, and she handed it to me with a small smile, lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. I don't know when it started, the casual conversation, the small laughs we shared, the way she leaned just a little closer than needed. There was a thrill in speaking with someone unattached, someone confident and mysterious, someone who could see through the carefully constructed image I presented to James. Hours passed, and the wine loosened my restraint. She found reasons to return, each time lingering slightly longer. I told myself it was harmless, just conversation, just attention. But the sparks in her gaze and the warmth in her touch whenever she handed me something made my resolve weaken. By the time the meal service began, we were chatting easily, laughing softly in hushed tones, careful not to attract the attention of passengers or crew. I felt alive in a way I hadn't expected on my honeymoon, torn between loyalty to my husband and the dangerous excitement this woman stirred within me. I caught James watching me from across the aisle, his peaceful face unaware of the storm brewing in my heart. Guilt surged, yet so did a rebellious curiosity. The lines between right and wrong blurred as the flight attendant smiled knowingly, as if sensing my inner conflict. When the cabin lights dimmed for rest, she returned one final time, offering a blanket. Our hands brushed, lingering just a moment too long. The touch sent a shiver through me, and I felt an intoxicating mixture of fear and desire. I told myself this was impossible, that it would never happen. Yet, as I watched her walk away, the decision had already formed in my mind. This was the start of something forbidden, something I knew I shouldn't pursue, but couldn't resist. The rest of the night passed in a haze of quiet tension. James slept beside me, blissfully unaware, while my mind replayed every glance, every touch, every smile from her. I felt a dangerous thrill, the kind that makes you simultaneously excited and terrified. By the time the plane began its descent, I knew that the honeymoon would never be as I had imagined. Something had changed in me, something I couldn't take back, and I was terrified of what that meant. The morning light filtered through the plane windows, casting a soft glow across the cabin. I woke slowly, James still asleep beside me, his hand resting on my thigh. I felt a pang of guilt, a reminder of the promise I had made on our wedding day. But even that guilt was dulled by the memory of her, the flight attendant with the confident smile and the knowing eyes that seemed to see right through me. She had already begun her rounds, moving gracefully between passengers, her uniform impeccable, her hair perfectly in place. I told myself to focus on James, to cherish this once-in-a-lifetime honeymoon. Yet, each time she passed by, I found my gaze drawn to her. Her presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore, and the thrill of her attention filled me with a dangerous excitement. When she stopped near my seat to offer a refill of coffee, our hands brushed once more. I felt a spark, a jolt that went straight to my chest. I forced myself to look away, pretending to busy myself with my phone. But I could feel her eyes on me, following me even as she moved down the aisle. James murmured something in his sleep, shifting closer. I reached for his hand, feeling the weight of the marriage I had just begun. I tried to anchor myself, to remember the love and commitment we had shared during the wedding. But the pull toward her was stronger than I expected. As the flight continued, she found reasons to return to our row. Each interaction seemed innocent on the surface, but beneath it was a tension that made my heart race. The casual touch of her hand on my arm, the lingering smiles, the soft laugh she reserved only for me, all of it felt like a dangerous game I couldn't resist. I knew this was wrong. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop, to remain loyal, to protect my marriage. But at the same time, there was a part of me that wanted to explore this forbidden attraction, to see how far it could go. By the time the lunch service began, she had managed to sit in the empty seat across from me while assisting another passenger nearby. We spoke quietly, pretending to talk about trivial things, air travel, destinations, favorite cities, but the undertone of flirtation was undeniable. I caught James watching from a few seats away, smiling at a magazine. My stomach churned with guilt. How could I even think about what I was feeling? And yet, when she leaned slightly closer to pass me the napkins, brushing against my hand, my resolve weakened further. After lunch, the cabin lights dimmed for a movie showing. I chose to sit in the window seat, hoping to distract myself with the film. But she appeared again, offering me another drink, and the proximity reignited the tension. Her eyes lingered on mine a moment too long, and I felt an uncontrollable heat rise inside me. I told myself it was just attention, nothing more. But the way she smiled, the way she leaned just a little closer, the casual brush of her hand, it was all deliberate, intoxicating, and it made my body respond in ways I couldn't explain. Hours passed in a blur of stolen glances, quiet laughs, and subtle touches. I felt like a different person, someone living on the edge, someone capable of betrayal I never imagined possible. Every time James shifted in his sleep, I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by desire. When she returned with the final round of drinks before landing, she leaned close, whispering something meant only for me. My heart pounded, my breath caught, and I felt the first real crack in my moral armor. I knew I was crossing a line. As we approached our destination, the tension became unbearable. I felt torn between two worlds, the loving, faithful wife beside me and the woman captivated by the dangerous allure of a stranger who knew exactly how to manipulate her emotions. The plane began its descent, and I realized I had to make a decision, either stop before the line was fully crossed, or give in to temptation and face the consequences. My hands trembled as I reached for James's, the weight of my thoughts pressing down like a heavy fog. The flight attendant passed by one last time before we landed, her eyes meeting mine in a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken game. My heart raced as the realization sank in, I had already stepped too far. The moment I looked at her and felt that spark, the path of betrayal had begun. Touching James's hand, I promised myself I would end it here, that I would protect our marriage. But deep down, I knew the pull of temptation would not easily let me go. Something inside me had shifted, something dangerous, and I was terrified of what would come next. The cabin lights dimmed once more as the flight continued on its final leg. I sat rigid in my seat, heart hammering, mind swirling with guilt and anticipation. James was asleep beside me, unaware of the storm brewing inside me, unaware that the line I had promised never to cross was already blurred. She appeared again, moving gracefully down the aisle, her presence like a magnet I couldn't resist. My pulse quickened as our eyes met. She smiled knowingly, a secret shared without words, a temptation that was impossible to ignore. When she reached my row, she paused just long enough to lean over and whisper, "Long flight, isn't it?" Her breath brushed my cheek, sending shivers down my spine. I nodded, words failing me, caught in the web she had spun around me. Minutes stretched into an unbearable tension. Every time she returned, every casual touch, every lingering smile, it felt like a betrayal with each heartbeat. I told myself this was harmless, just excitement, just curiosity, but deep down, I knew it was more. As the cabin lights flickered dim for rest, she lingered, offering a blanket and a soft, private smile. My hands trembled as I accepted it, our fingers brushing, and for a moment, I imagined what it would be like if I let this temptation take over completely. The thrill was intoxicating, almost addictive. The careful line between desire and guilt blurred further as we shared quiet, stolen conversations. She listened intently to my words, laughed softly at my jokes, and made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt even with James. I could see my reflection in the window, a woman torn apart by conflicting emotions, love, desire, guilt, curiosity. My heart ached with the knowledge that what I was feeling was a betrayal, yet the heat of temptation made it impossible to resist. Finally, as the plane cruised at altitude, she lingered at my seat, her hand brushing against mine. It was a deliberate touch, slow, teasing, electric. My breath caught, my mind screamed to stop. My body whispered to follow. We slipped into the empty galley for a moment when no passengers were near. It was supposed to be a brief encounter, a stolen secret. But once there, the tension exploded. We gave in to the desire that had been building since the first glance. Every touch, every kiss was a mixture of fear and exhilaration. My mind was a battlefield, torn between loyalty to James and the intoxicating thrill of being desired by someone unattached, someone daring, someone forbidden. When it ended, we both knew we had crossed a line that could never be undone. My uniformed temptation smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You'll never forget this," she whispered. And I knew she was right. Returning to my seat beside James, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I forced a smile, tried to focus on his hand in mine, but the memory of what had just happened burned inside me, impossible to erase. Landing was a blur. Passengers disembarked, unaware of the secret storm that had passed between us at 30,000 feet. James was oblivious, chatting excitedly about the hotel, the beaches, the adventures ahead. And I sat silently, heart heavy, guilty, and strangely exhilarated. The first night at the hotel, lying beside James, I felt the full weight of my actions. I kissed him softly, feeling the warmth of his love, yet the memory of her lingered in my mind like a shadow. I was trapped between two worlds, the loyalty of a wife and the reckless desire of a woman who had been seduced by temptation. Over the following days, I carried the secret like a heavy stone in my chest. Every smile, every touch from James, was tainted by my betrayal. Yet, the memory of the flight attendant haunted me, making my pulse quicken whenever I recalled her soft voice, her knowing eyes, her deliberate touches. The guilt became unbearable. I realized that what I had done on that flight was not just a momentary lapse, it was a decision that had changed me, that had forever altered the trust between me and James. I didn't know how I could confess, how I could face the consequences, or if I even wanted to. The thrill of the affair had left an imprint on my soul, and every time I looked at James, I felt both love and shame intertwined, impossible to separate. Weeks passed, and the honeymoon ended. We returned home, smiling for family and friends, but inside, I was hollow, carrying a secret that could destroy everything. The flight attendant remained a phantom in my mind, a reminder of temptation, desire, and the fragile nature of fidelity. I learned a harsh truth. Love can coexist with betrayal, and desire can sometimes overpower loyalty. But the cost is always the same, a heart weighed down by guilt, a life forever marked by a secret that can never be undone. And as I looked at James sleeping beside me one night, I knew that the memory of that flight would haunt me forever, the flight where I cheated, the flight that changed me, the flight that stole a piece of my soul.